Hello and welcome to Mindshift. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button and follow along for some tips and tools on how to become your best self. Today, I have a really exciting episode that I'm just excited for, guys, because I'm bringing my friend Richard here on to actually help me co-host this podcast and take it in a whole new direction, take it in a direction that I think will go a lot further the more we get people with a similar vision on board. And so today we're gonna find a little bit about Richard, and then we're just gonna kind of have a really fun conversation about all kinds of different topics and really kind of showcase this guy's intelligence and knowledge and passion for the things that he's involved in, the things that he's knowledgeable about, and really get a sense of why I want him to be on the show with me. So, Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Cody. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's been a productive morning. So I just kind of want to start from the beginning with you. I know that when I met you, one of the first things you ever talked about was Alaska, how you love Alaska, how you love fishing, how you love just the wild that's up there, and how that you can't wait to get back to it. And so, what is it about Alaska that really first drew you there and really first kind of made you thrive as you were living in that environment?
Honestly, what drew me there was my brother. He ended up actually going there first. But if you're talking about like the mindset of why I really went, it's because of like our generation, man. Like we didn't have the computers and the phones. Like our way of escaping was books, and I was a huge Gary Paulson. Any kids books, Hatchet, any kids books that were about going and living in the mountains or camping. I had the Boys of America like handbook. It wasn't the Boy Scouts. It's an actual like handbook, and it taught you how to make boats and soap and everything from the woods and the forests and like where you are, and I would just absorb it. I also had treasure seeking books on where to find gold and where shipwrecks went down. And out at the mouth of the Columbian River, there's estimated like $88 million worth of gold bullion out in right there in the ocean, but the currents are so massive that no one can get it. So like those kinds of adventures and that adventure sinking, and then also just that solace, like living in a city. I actually grew up in two very different environments. My dad worked for a big car company, and so we traveled a lot. And I was actually born in Burbank, California, near Hollywood, Disney Studios, Universal Studios. And I grew up in that environment of LA, California, and seeing Hollywood and seeing all these famous people. But then all of a sudden, I was ripped away from that, and we were living in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And I like to say, my dad's midlife crisis was to become a farmer. He could have bought a cool car or divorced my mom, but his midlife crisis was to be a farmer. So he bought a 20-acre hay farm and a milk cow and built a barn. And I had to milk cows and cut hay and live a very country lifestyle, living out there in the middle of the world, middle of nowhere, Texas, really. And it taught me things that I didn't realize at the time. To me, it was just like grandma and grandpa are gone. Like I'm out here in the boonies. Like I want all the fun things again. But at the same time,
Mhm.
me and my brother got to play imagination. We'd run around in these woods and we'd take BB guns and shoot things, like not animals. We were pretty good kids, just shooting targets, putting cans up. One of my favorite things is the hay bales. A lot of people from the cities don't know this, but the hay bales, when they stack them together, it makes this nice little crotch where you can like put your butt. And so at night, when we were camping out on the property, when you have fires or whatever, we'd go to the hay bales and climb on top and we'd look at the stars. And I don't know if you've ever seen stars without city lights, but a sky like that, there's just everything is there's just nothing is impossible when you can see space that clearly. And so with Alaska's kind of like that last vestige of wild. There's more land in Alaska uninhabited that it's just mind-boggling. There's still like sightings and ideas of ice age animals still living in parts of Alaska that people talk about, and we can't even prove it because we don't have enough infrastructure to actually go in there and see if some of these ice age animals are still alive. I'm not saying any mammoths are alive or anything like that, but there are
Mhm.
sightings, and there are like one of my brother was telling me about, there were some guys that were doing some hunts up where the polar bears are, and this guy saw two polar bears fighting, and then he heard the snuffs of a bear. When you get close to a bear is being threatening, it goes and these snuffs were louder than anything he'd heard, and the two polar bears stopped fighting and hightailed it out of there. They just ran. Like whatever was snuffing scared the crap out of polar bears. And I don't know if you know anything about polar bears, but nothing scares polar bears.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy. Then it's called, I can't, it's called the short face bear. And there's no proof that it exists, but there are ideas of that. And so when I went to Alaska, it was that lifestyle, living off the land, homesteading, gold, salmon, and just the idea of going up there and being at the top of the world. One of my ultimate dreams is actually to go to Antarctica now, so I can say that I've worked in Alaska and I've stood on the top of the world and the bottom of the world, because you don't understand what it feels like and how much of a place it is to watch the sun. Like noon is due south. It's not above you anymore. And like that feeling of like knowing what time it is at all times, because the sun is like a clock, it's like a pendulum, spinning around you instead of, you know, like that's the way I believe in flat earth. If the sun did that all over the planet, then because that's what it feels like. But it doesn't do that down
Yeah.
here near the equator. It goes around, but up there it's just so much beauty. But that's why I went to Alaska, is I wanted to enact that inner like caveman, wild man. I don't know if you ever saw Jeremiah Johnson, like
Yep.
just that
Yep.
idea
Absolutely.
of living off the land. And it's an amazing place.
And I love that. I really love that you brought like that kind of childhood awe and adventure into it, because I believe that's something that a lot of us still have, but we kind of bury as, you know, financial challenges come up and life comes up and we choose a direction, maybe feel stuck, all that kind of stuff. And then everything that really fed us as a kid just completely gets, put to the side. And it's just tough. It's tough when you really don't have that sense of awe and wonder anymore.
Yeah, it's really honestly the direction of my life. I've made quite a few mistakes. I'm not going to say it's been pretty in this cozy, awesome life of travel. It's quite rough and quite hard. So I don't recommend it for everyone. But I remember as a kid reading, and I distinctly remember this moment at like 19, 20 years old. Was trying to go to school, was trying to go to college. A lot of my friends were, and I had been living in a book since the moment I could read. I was reading at like 2, 3 years old. Like I was reading like second, third grade books in kindergarten, and I just kept going from there. I just read everything I could get my hands on. And one of the things at 20, when I got there, it was just, do I want to go to school, get the job, do what like society has told me to do? And every adventure will always just be what it was as a kid. It was just an adventure in a book. Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues in the Sea. And I was just like, nah, I don't want that. Like, I want to go and make my own adventures. I want to go see Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Everest. Like knowing what happens on Mount Everest and the whole like tourist and like what it causes, I have no desire to go up there. It sounds miserable, but I would love to go to the Himalayas, like and see Tibet and things like that, and go on my own adventures. And I didn't want to live in a book. And to this day, my whole entire life has been trying to create a lifestyle that I work, I make money, I'm happy with it, but I'm not waiting for a 2 week vacation paid for by an employer. Like to
Mhm.
me, that is a living nightmare, and I
Yeah, I
hate it.
absolutely
Yeah.
agree with that. I think it's absolutely insane that we trade our most precious resource that we will never get back, which is our time, in order to have a lifestyle sometime, to be able to travel eventually, to be able to actually do the things that fulfill us. It doesn't make sense to me either. I mean, I'm not, dissing on that. If that's the way that you create your life, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's just it's not for me. I know, like for
Well, we
me,
wouldn't we wouldn't have home buddies, or we wouldn't have society if we didn't have home buddies, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like the reason
absolutely.
we have a place to come back to and infrastructure is because of people who do stay home. So I respect it. It's just for the first time in history, back in the day, you got to think like the Magna Carta, Leif Erikson, all these people, when they went on an adventure, it was almost 99% sure it was death. They were going to die. If they
Yeah.
came back, it was a luxury. And now we can literally go anywhere on the planet within some exceptions, and we don't have to worry about dying. And yet most people aren't doing that.
Yeah.
Most
Well, and
people
I
are
know
just
like
staying
the
home.
same sentiment is the reason why, like after high school, I sold everything I owned. I wanted to get rid of everything and I wanted to go travel, and I did. And you know, I'm not suggesting people do it the way I did it because I had definitely made my mistakes and had my challenges too. But I wanted to go see the world. I wanted to go hitchhike around the US. I wanted to see everything I could. And I didn't see not having the ideal job or enough money as a way to stop me. I figured I can, you know, I have enough money for a bus ticket. I have a place to stay once I get to Tahoe. Let's figure this out. Let's go and, you know, I'll get a
Mhm.
job when I get there and I'll see what happens. And it was both the most like challenging time of my life, but also just full of growth, full of lessons, full of how to succeed, of what not to do, all of it. And it
Mhm.
was such an fulfilling time in my life that I would never do again. You know, I still want to travel. I still want to see the world. I just want to do it a little bit more luxurious than it was back then. Let's just put it that way. So
More stable.
yeah,
It
exactly.
sucks to go, like, I will tell anybody who is considering doing it, going on that, you will get tired of the constant instability. Like, having to rely on other people when you come back to reality, it just sucks. Like, you get to a point where you want your own things, you want your own home, and the only person you're reliant on is yourself, because it starts feeling like you're a burden rather than an adventurer and somebody that actually is accomplishing anything. And
Yeah,
that's one of my
absolutely.
biggest reasons that I'm trying to, like, change myself and cause my own mind shifts, is I want to be in a place where this is my life and it's self-sustaining, and not this thing that I have to constantly, like, go back. Like, I have a buddy and his grandfather is a famous adventurer in National Geographic. He was one of the first Western men. He was the first man to ever take the Nile and the Congo in a kayak. And but the thing is he had a home, he had a life, and he would save up his money, plan the whole trip out, and that's why he was successful, and why he, like, people did die, but he lived through all of it. He died at the age of 88, and he traversed, like, multiple mountain peaks. And it was one of those things, he didn't want to look on his life and regret it. He wanted to look back on his life, and he's like, I'd rather die trying, having a life that I didn't regret not doing something, than not. And he did it. But his whole reason he was successful was he had this strong base where he could go back, earn the money, make the plans, and then go on his adventure. And when his adventure was over with, he went right back. He wasn't dependent on anyone but himself.
Yeah. Well, and I really like how you put that in a great segue into kind of the trade-off that I think most of us makes at one point in our life, which is I want the stability. I don't always want to be on the road. I don't always want to be, you know, wondering where I'm going to be sleeping next or if there's a place for me when I get there or whatever that may look like. I want stability, right? I want to be able to afford what I want when I want it. I don't want to have to hustle for it. I don't want to have to, you know, go without. So let's settle down. Let's go to a 9 to 5 job. Let's, you know, essentially put all of this passion, all this adventure that feeds some of us on the back burner for retirement someday, for that 2 week vacation once we put in enough time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once we do, a part of us dies. I mean, at least for me, I'm not saying this is across the board or anything like that, but I am saying that when we give up on our passions and decide that I'm just going to fit society's molds, then we are literally putting a part of us on the back burner, saying that, you know what, this thing that feeds me is no longer important right now, and it may never be important again because we get comfortable, we get, you know, complacent, all of that in our jobs. And so when you decided to leave Alaska, what was, I mean, was this part of the main factors of why you left, was to go and try out a
Well,
different job? What was the kind of the catalyst for you leaving Alaska?
honestly, I never stayed in Alaska. I lived in Alaska in the summers, spring to, like, early to late spring to early to late fall, depending on the year, depending on what I needed to get done. So, like, the longest I ever stayed was April 1st to October, and then I was gone. I never actually lived up there year round and never had residency. And one of the biggest things is like I was a fisherman. I was a commercial fisherman. I was doing salmon and long lining halibut in the Copper River Sound, or I'm sorry, the Prince William Sound in the Copper River Basin area in a town called Cordova, Alaska. And I loved it there. I also fished in Bristol Bay that for 2 years as well. And so I did a lot of adventuring. I even took a 75-year-old World War II boat through the Aleutians and Falls Pass to Kodiak. Like I saw some cool stuff, but the problem was it wasn't consistent enough. And I realized some of my mistakes was is that I wasn't staying there. There's money up there to be made. There's a whole life that you can create up there, and there's a lot that that state does for people who want to choose that because it's hard. And I never actually pulled the trigger on that. And I'm actually going to be pulling the trigger on that. I am moving to Alaska permanently coming these next few months. Like my goal is to leave in the next couple of weeks and move up there. My brother's up there all the time, so I'm going to be joining him and helping him and start fishing and get my own boats and things like that. But I left because it wasn't consistent enough. I wanted more consistency. You're based on pay. So like the canneries that buy the fish from the fishermen, they decide what we're getting paid based on world markets. And so some years we got paid 18 cents a pound for pink salmon. Other years we got paid 47 cents. This year they're talking about like something like 80 cents due to inflation and food shortages. We might be rich, like but those swings sucked because some years I only came home with 5 grand in my pocket. I instantly had to get a job. I couldn't go and relax somewhere. I had to just get a job so I could pay the bills, and it sucked. And other years I came back and I was able to relax and get like a part-time job or something and just like chill and relax and wait to go back. And that was really cool. But one of my problems was that was all the money I made. I wasn't getting ahead like I needed to. I wasn't making enough to like buy a place, get a house, start to progress. It was just this kind of stasis of you go fishing and then you come home and chill, go fish or work. There was no like progression that I was making financially, emotionally, spiritually. It was just kind of stuck there. And then as soon as I got back to Alaska, I was happy. I got a CDL in 2014 trying to work on the oil fields, but at the same time that I got it, the oil fields crashed. And so it didn't matter. Like I fished from in Alaska from 2013 to 2019. So all the teams basically, I was in Alaska every summer. And I'd come back in the fall and I'd drive. I drove taxi, I drove shuttles, I drove semi trucks, I drove dump trucks, I drove all sorts of things. And so it it was okay. I made money. I got all the bills paid. I'm, financially responsible, but I still didn't have my own house. I still didn't have my own things. And so that's kind of why I'm going back. And it's why I ultimately left was I wanted to come back here, build a plan, build a life, and then eventually get back to Alaska. If I can make enough money on the side and through, passive income plans and things like that, I could go to Alaska and it wouldn't matter what I made. It would just be more of a fun camping trip that I get paid for. And that hasn't really panned out. And one of the reasons why is because as much as I drive and as good of a driver as I am, I have not had a speeding ticket since 2010 or any infractions whatsoever. So like I'm I'm I wouldn't say the best driver, but I will say that I am remarkably lucky as well as safe. Um, but I hate it. I just hate driving. I hate the culture around driving. We have a very horrible system in this world with unhealthy foods. Like, I don't know how much time you spent in a truck shop or any of your viewers have, but a truck stop, it's all processed salt, meat, bread, and cheese. Like, there are cups of vegetables, but those vegetables are the ones that last the longest. So it's carrots, cauliflower, broccoli, celery, and then hard boiled eggs, and there's only so much you can eat of that. Like I can't, unless I'm stopping at a truck stop that specifically has a restaurant where I can get like a steak and actual vegetables that have been cooked, maybe do that. But then that gets expensive. In a semi truck, there's some semi trucks that have like little kitchenettes or you can like do it. But I never really wanted to do that because I didn't want to have to go and clean all of my dishwares in a truck stop bathroom. It just sounds gross. And I
Yeah.
saw guys doing it and they did it, and I'm sure they ate healthier. But for me, that was not. I'm a cook. I love cooking. I love having a full kitchen and trying to do it out of these menial things without having, the ability. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. Like I want things right. And that's another big reason I want to go to Alaska is there is no processed meat that anyone eats there. It's all fish, moose, you know, crab, oysters, whatever the heck grows, clams. There's so many edible mushrooms that you would only see in five-star restaurants just grow like crack everywhere. There is this weed they call pineapple grass, and it's more powerful sleep aid than chamomile. And like it just grows through the cracks of the pavement on the asphalt. And you just pick it up and go boil it, and it tastes like pineapple, but it makes you pass out. And that's why they call it pineapple grass or pineapple weed. It's just like, it's crazy how much is there. I have a sister-in-law. She makes all these botanical herbs and salves and things like that from the plants that she harvests up there. And I love that lifestyle. It's so hunter gatherer with cell phones.
Yeah.
And it's the only place I've ever actually lived that I loved the society and the culture built around it. While I love so many aspects of what's down here in America, I never really felt like I fit in, but I did feel like I kind of felt I fit into that because it exemplified the things that I valued as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that that you're, taking the risk and really following your heart of what really makes Richard thrive, makes Richard excited about life again instead of, yeah, I'm gonna be in the truck for the next 6 months. We'll see how this season goes, right? Which we already know how it's gonna go. It's gonna be pretty much more or less the same. But I also kind of want to use that to segue into our next subject, which is futurism, the future of all of this. And the one thing that I believe in trucking, and you having experience in the industry may have a totally different opinion, but I truly believe that it's a dying industry. I do believe that within the next 30 years, we're not going to have truckers the way we do now. And I don't believe we should. I don't believe that anything infrastructure wise within the US shouldn't be automated. And of course, we're seeing automated cars and Uber services and everything pop up all across the planet right now. We know that there's, I want to say at least 4 or 5 different companies that have already developed automatic trucks, autonomous trucks to drive. And right now, it's of course on small scale and more local, so that we can figure out all the kinks and bugs, all that stuff. But regardless, it is being implemented. It is the future, and if we can have people driving, 24 hours a day without needing sleep, without ever having to worry about sleep, well, then it's gonna completely put every trucker off the road that didn't invest in this technology.
I think that would probably be the truth when it comes to a corporate mindset. And the reason I say that is because Walmart, um, Amazon, all of those companies, it is a constant moving of product. And so you need that kind of automated, ness, I guess, in their warehouses. They have Amazon had that first like warehouse on the East Coast that was all run by robots. And it was more efficient. Does it make mistakes? Yes, but it is definitely more efficient having something constantly working that never needs a break, doesn't have to go eat, doesn't have to go to the bathroom. The only time it's down is if it breaks. And then you have like 3 engineers and roboticists that fix it. Like that's all you really need. And that's great. But the problem is you don't have that kind of enclosed environment with a semi truck. And then the biggest aspect of that is you also don't have control of what exactly is going on. So for me, unless AI becomes almost conscious, like a dumb AI, if you will, in fiction, you're not going to have a computer system that can deal with changes on the fly. And so what I mean by that is like imagine a warehouse in Amazon going to another Amazon warehouse across the country. You have highway systems, tollways, and all these things. All of those places, we already have it. If you look up around the truck stops when it says all trucks must pull over, there's machines, there's lasers, there's things reading those trucks, seeing how heavy they are with infrared, and then they check to see what the weight is on each axle when you pull in. But they also have communicators in those trucks telling them, hey, you are good, you can keep going, don't come in. But if you don't have those communicators, which a lot of like private truck drivers don't because it's expensive, they don't in, but the corporations do have all of that in to make you more efficient. So that efficiency is the holy grail of a corporate system. And the reason I say that is I want to segue into what truck drivers are actually like. They are husbands and brothers and fathers trying to make a living. And the majority of what they're hauling aren't things coming out of a warehouse. My last year was doing a step deck, and I was hauling heavy equipment through North Dakota, Iowa, and South Dakota for a construction company out of Fargo, North Dakota. There's no way an AI automated truck can deal with that. I was driving down into ditches, into over hills, like no road systems sometimes to drop these things off. And sometimes there was multiple machinery that had to be backed into, and you needed multiple people to help you. Or sometimes there was parts where you got stuck, or there was a way that you couldn't get on, and so they took heavy machinery and picked up the back of your truck and placed it where it needed to be while your truck sat there. The trailer was swiveled by a crane that was there or something, so they could get that piece that they needed exactly where they needed it. And AI will never be able to take that over, like in our current ability. Maybe in 100 years everything would be automated. And I think, if you don't mind segueing, 3D printing and the ability to build things with that could completely change that as well. But you're always going to have that guy who has a truck and a trailer, and his buddy down the street needs a bobcat delivered,
Right.
or something like that. And so there is a life there for truck drivers. But when it comes to corporate, yeah, I think and I think that's the majority. When you see these, headlines in the news and the media of 50,000, 150,000 truck job openings, and it's everywhere. It's Germany. Like, I can literally, with my ability, move to almost any Western society or non-Western society. I won't get paid very well, but I can move anywhere, and there's a truck that's empty waiting for someone to drive it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And
so that is the biggest thing. If you can get rid of this whole entire sector of that, it's automated. And I agree,
yeah.
but it's not
Well,
all of it.
I agree with you to a
What were you
point.
gonna
I
say?
think that the technology will be there. I think it'll be a lot less than 100 years, but I still think that we have a good 30 to 50 years till we're actually there. I think there's a lot of different things that have to be in place, and it's not going to happen, as you're saying, until the top corporations take advantage of this technology, and then we progress it from there a lot further than we ever even thought possible, right?
Well, it's
But
it's also it's also government, because who do you blame? Who gets in trouble when that truck kills somebody, as well as the infrastructure to build to relay the information. A truck can drive down the road and you can use like Tesla vision, but at the end of the day, the more efficient and the safer it is building those new lasers so that the computer of the infrastructure that it's using is relaying information so they communicate seamlessly. Just imagine when you're going down the road and Google tells you to get off on the freeway and you missed it because you weren't looking at your Google. Imagine, but when you wear an Apple Watch and you're using Apple Maps, this thing vibrates, reminds you, hey, you have a turn coming up. But if you don't have a watch, you don't have that relay. But imagine if the road actually was sending you signals, or the computer, the AI. So it's a lot of infrastructure, and it's a lot of political clout and government, reach that's going to allow that to happen. And until the AI gets good enough, right now I think AI is great for driving these self-driving cars, but they still need a driver because it cannot process every single situation.
well,
So
and the
is 30
infrastructure is
years
really what
realistic?
it takes,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
Like
and it's the
the
infrastructure.
And like I think that what we're seeing right now with AI is, I mean, everything is true. Right now, we are not to a point yet that we can just throw out every single Tesla in auto mode and say, "Hey, it's going to be okay," right? I think that we're still developing it, but as fast as everything is accelerating, I do think that autonomous cars are going to be more the norm than not, and relatively quickly, which is going to fade out to all of it. And I really think that once we start getting that infrastructure in place, the I've heard this example a lot, and I think it's fascinating because we talk about autonomous cars or trucks or whatever, and when it does kill somebody, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, you know, what are the implications of that? Which is absolutely fascinating, right? There's all kinds of moral implications, and whether or not it killed one person or four people that were in the car or whatever that looks like, and was it the right choice? But then I also think about, we're giving hormonal teenagers that literally have no idea how to regulate their own thoughts this 2,000, 3,000 pound death machine and saying, good luck. I mean, there might be a little bit of training, some of us
Mhm.
go to driver's ed, but the amount of accidents every single day from humans is just astronomical. And one or two deaths from a electronic car, an autonomous car, is going to be a lot less than all these hormonal drivers, all these irritated drivers, all these people that are in a rush to get somewhere and literally making just these dumb choices because they're not thinking clearly. So I'm like,
Mhm.
is it really as bad as what we think it's going to be? I mean, I know as soon as autonomous car, once we go fully autonomous, hits somebody and kills them, it's going to be this huge thing, right? The media is going to blow it
Mhm.
up. We're all going to be like, oh my gosh, this autonomous car killed somebody. But I'm like, compared to how we were just doing it, like, once we're all autonomous, let's say we have 5 deaths that year, that's a lot less than 100,000 deaths the previous year because we didn't have autonomous cars, right? And so I
Yeah.
truly think that ultimately it is better, even though there's still this morality thing that we do have to consider.
Well, and taking that into effect, one of the biggest things for me with AI, especially autonomous driving vehicles, is you're giving that teenager a 2,000 pound car. Can he cause damage with it? Absolutely. But there's a huge difference, especially if you look into the research on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity now is really more of a buzzword. We can be as secure as we put it in, but we're not as secure as like we are led to believe. And a semi truck hauling freight, the smallest amount that is legally allowed with no extra permits is 80,000 pounds. Like when I was in CDL school, they said, you have to learn how to control this thing better than anyone else that drives because you are driving an 80,000 pound missile. And depending on what's in the back, it does explode as well. Some doesn't explode, but you don't even have to have it be explode. If your brakes go out on the trailer and it catches the trailer on fire, that is a flammable trailer full of flammable things as well. So it doesn't even have to be a volatile chemical like oil hauling or anything like that or gas to cause it to explode and erupt in flames. There's so many things that can go wrong with those trucks that you need to have the ability to not only make sure that this vehicle can drive itself, but that it's not impossible, or it's almost completely impossible to be hacked. Because what kind of terrorist right now, any cyber terrorism is just messing with things. But now you're talking about anything that's automated could be taken control of and actually hurt people. And that's an aspect of AI and autonomous vehicles that people don't think about because already our car companies have the ability to shut off your car, to do, the government can even do it. They can shut off your cell phone, shut off your car because of all the computer stuff. So what happens when an autonomous vehicle is taking control of it and there's no driver in there to shut it off? If somebody's controlling it remotely, that's the whole process of how a drone works in Iraq. And all the tech is already there inside these trucks, just nobody's using it. And
Well,
then
and I
the
wonder
more
if
automated
like
it
a
gets.
scenario like that, because we already have the option to just completely disarm it. If like let's say there's an alarm going off that this thing's going off route and nothing you're doing is fixing it, then you can press the okay, let's abort, and just completely kill the truck and then go figure out what went wrong. And I do think that there's going to be some sort of you know either abort button or ultra security that has to be private. It can't be open and all that kind of stuff to be able to actually let the infrastructure run smoothly and how it's
Mhm.
supposed to. But I also want to use this to segue into something that you just mentioned, kind of going back a little bit, which is like 3D printing and construction. And this is a topic that I get super excited about just because everything is changing as a result of this technology. If you can kind of see in the background here, right behind me, my 3D printer that I'm
Hmm.
learning how to use right now, and trying to figure out all the ins and outs of it, how to use it. But right now we're seeing, huge construction projects, huge
Hmm.
infrastructure go in, and we're seeing 3D printers that are, I mean, things of science fiction. I mean, sure, you have the big ones, the cranes, even ones with one arms now that can print all kinds of different materials from wood to metal to concrete. But now I know I shared with you not too long ago how they even have drones that are additive printers that can go and like actually just fly around, and you don't have to have an actual physical thing moving it. It's these flying robots that can measure all these different measurements to make sure, you're putting your concrete right or whatever. And I think it's such a cool world and fascinating how everything we can think of, it does not matter the job, from driving to construction to warehouses to you name it, that it's being taken over right now by AI. And I am all for it. I am definitely super excited about it. I know some people it scares them. Yes, jobs are going to change. They always have, but the possibilities that this presents and how it opens up stuff that, I mean, we don't even know the implications of what is possible as a result of this. I mean, we're now even talking about printing, structures on the moon and eventually Mars from this technology we're developing right now.
Hmm. The construction company I worked with last year, one of their biggest money makers is infrastructure through the states, and it was bridges. It was overpasses over the freeway. And one of my favorite 3D printers that I saw a few years back, and I think it was China, but it might have been somewhere else. They have a 3D printer now that literally builds the bridge as it goes across. So it's structurally sound enough to hold up this 3D printer as it's building itself, working its way across. Could you imagine the implications of that, even for like in war? And that's why those things are getting built, because like if you got an army, you got to move and you got to get across the river in the next 2 days, and you can just put a 3D printer onto the thing, and it doesn't even have to get to the other side to have two people working. Like that's just crazy to think about. But what was crazy to me to think about with just us nobodies in the middle of North Dakota is that winter there is so insane. It's like living in a deep freeze, and it just eats away the concrete. It eats away all these things. So those bridges, those overpasses have to be rebuilt every so many years, have to be restructured, refortified. And if you could have a 3D printer do it, imagine the implications. Instead of hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars to fix these things, you just put the 3D printer on it every spring and it reinforces it. It doesn't even have to build a bridge. It's just like going through using lasers and infrared to see all the cracks, fill them in, and restructure that bridge. Make sure maybe every so many years, 20 to 50 instead of 2 to 10, the bridge gets torn down and it's a fully brand new bridge. But you don't have to have all these people. And there's an aspect to that where it's like there's so many families and people, but there'll still be guys who have to like install the 3D printer, get it going, get it set up. And so there's still going to be work there. And I have a certain aspect to it that maybe one day everything will be automated. That's kind of like the early 20th century writers like Isaac Asimov, where just everything's already done. And we're going into that because what do you need a guy for if you got like a Tesla bot that can set it all up? And like if you have humanoid robots that are doing humanoid things, there's a process of that in the next 30 to 50 years or even 100 years that we don't have to do anything. And what does that
Yeah.
world look like? and that's
But I
that's
think it's so
kind of
amazing
scary.
too, right? Because like it really frees up you to do anything you want. And I believe it opens up a whole new sector for all these entrepreneurs. And I know not everybody's an entrepreneur, and that's fine. There's always going to be jobs. I think it was Warren Buffett who was just saying they'll never take away your skill set, no matter what the currency is, whether it's, I have some clamshells I'm going to trade you, or whether it's like, full on currency that we have now. The concept is still the same. And as long as you have I'm a massage therapist. I have my massage license. I did everything I needed to do to understand the anatomy and how the body works, all that stuff. And as a result of that, you know I will always be able to provide this service. I will always be able to help people relax in this way. And with people actually just have a really great skill set, if they're good at learning, then you're set. No matter what the future looks like, you're set. but
Mhm.
it also is just so incredibly exciting to me that that we are doing this, that we can build bridges with just a machine that does it as it goes. I know that another one, and of course, China being one of the superpowers has some of the best examples right now, but where they set up a whole construction site where they're building a warehouse, and every single thing there is automated. It's an automated 3D printer. So they're 3D printing the warehouse, and there has to be no workers on site. I don't know how
Mhm.
many's on their team and how many is actually looking at the software, all that kind of stuff. But as far as the actual construction part of it, there's not a single worker. It's all
Yeah.
machines, which is so cool. Like straight sounds like it's science fiction. But the implications of that, like we can colonize Mars without ever having a human on there at first. You can have,
Mhm.
at least the majority of the infrastructure in place, and all of it's controlled right here from Earth, which is just absolutely astounding to me that we have the ability to possibly do this here very, very soon. And
Oh, it makes so much more sense to send 3D printers and robots to Mars, build the structure, test if it's structurally sound, that it's able to hold environment, then send people there. Like, and the fact that we can do that, like it's going to cost way more money than I would like it to cost. But the fact that we are at that point, like I love the idea that we are already a multiplanetary species. You know, Curiosity is on Mars. That's us. We
yeah.
are the aliens invading another planet, and we've done it. Like,
Well,
and
and I really
people don't think
actually
of it that
want to
way.
pick up on something that you just said, which I think is absolutely where we're going, which is, yeah, of course, I would like it to cost less, and in the future, once we drive the price down, it will. However, I also see the more we get this autonomous infrastructure going on for everything, then the more we're able to divert our dollars into building the infrastructure for Mars, right? And the more we can think way, way bigger than we've ever thought before, because we have the time, we have the money, we have the resources. And now I don't have to, worry about what my workers are doing, if they're actually getting the quota that I want, if they're building the products the right way, because it's all automated. It's all a
Mhm.
program. It's always already been quality checked, and we're good to go. I don't even have to worry about that now. Now I have all these resources, especially our brain and time, to figure out this other problem, right? And the more
Mhm.
we can do that, then I think not only is it going to drive costs down, but we don't even know what we don't know we're going to do. Like there is
Yeah.
just so many possibilities. Like one thing that's fascinating to me is there's I forget the name of the equation, but there's this equation back when Kodak actually developed the first digital camera. And this was like 1968 and something right around there. And at the time, it could record a 0.001 megabyte of information.
Mhm.
And they were like, what the hell is this? This is not gonna like ever go anywhere. The next 2 years, it doubled 0.002%, megabytes. And then it kept doing this. But what they didn't, of course, realize, and the reason why Kodak went out of business, is that it doubles every single year. And at a certain point, that compounds like crazy, to the point where we have a supercomputer with a digital camera in every single person's pocket.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about this technology is it hasn't been slowing down. It doesn't care what the market's doing. It doesn't care where the dollars are going. It doesn't care that nothing more is being put into this, although at this point there is, of course. It's doubling every single year, no matter what. And we're at this point on this curve where we are and this is computer chips, this is silicon chips, this is, everything technology wise, but where we're getting the computational power right now, like in this time frame, of every single brain on the planet, which is crazy. Like thinking how much information, how much, like the quantum computing, which is, we see it every single day. There's going to be a headline on quantum computing and how close we are, or the breakthroughs we've made. And the faster we're getting at it, all of that stuff. And this is just going to compound it even more as this technology gets better, to the point where we can use these things for applications that we have never even thought of yet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's just crazy to think about. Like I truly think that true AI, like singularity, will be from quantum computing. I don't think with a binary system that you can get the kind of creativity, not even creativity, I guess more along the lines of like true consciousness in a binary programming, quantum programming, because I think we tend to, in our physical realm, pick binary things, where black or white, cold or warm. But at the same time, the ability to go outside the box is the reason we've evolved. And to just, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pick those two. I want to pick something else. And that's the problem with a binary system and creating true consciousness. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a coder. I don't understand those things. But what I do and have read about it, it makes more sense to me that something that's thinking in 0 through 9 is going to be a lot closer to consciousness than something that just thinks in 0 and 1.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. And I do think that, the quantum computing technology that's coming out is much, much closer to actual consciousness, and even things that we think are binary. The more we study the smallest particles of what makes these up, then it's only because we put our focus on it that it becomes binary in that moment, but it's not actually binary, right?
And bringing that a little back around is like, that's where I think truly that trucking and things like that will become completely automated. I think right now with our automated system of like, what do? I go up or down, right or left, and it just has to think like that. It's not really taking in what's there. It's trying to just categorize what's there and
No,
make
a
a
thousand
decision.
percent. And I also think that, like, with the quantum computing, it's the only way to actually make a system make sense. Like, one of our biggest problems as far as um, wasted energy is stop signs. It takes so much energy for a car to stop and go, especially when there's no other car there. We shouldn't have
Mhm.
to, right? However, because we don't trust everybody, because people are going to abuse that power if that is the law, that, oh, well, I was here first, so I'm just going to speed right through. And well, the other guy's thinking the same thing. And next thing you know, you have two guys that made a really poor decision. But
Mhm.
if it's automated, if the computer can measure the stop sign, it can, there's a sensor on it saying, okay, there's a stop sign coming up here. And it can measure the sensors from the other cars going, then the cars are automatically going to know which one can go right through the stop sign without even ever paying attention to it, and which one's going to have to slow down enough to not hit the other car and also go through the stop sign without ever stopping, and save a whole ton of energy as a result of that, right? save
See,
save brake pads, all that kind of stuff.
that's the difference between infrastructure and putting it all in the cars. For me, what I would like to see, because no matter what happens with our technology, there are going to be classic cars. There's going to be cars that don't have this tech. And so for me, it's not just the car communicating with the car, but the car communicating with the other stop sign. If that stop sign has a sensor, and it's just a simple sensor and adaptive cruise control, when you're driving down the highway and you got that car in front of you and your car pulls up to it and is like, oh, you're going slower than I am, I'm just going to adapt to you and follow behind until the owner, you as the driver, hits the blinker, and then it guns it and you get over. But as long as you're in the lane and your cruise control is set to 70, but the guy in front of you is going 65, it's going 65. You put that same tech in that stop sign with the ability to communicate with the car, you're coming up to that stop sign, and this stop sign's like, and goes, hey, there's nothing here, or hey, there's a car coming at 35 miles an hour and it won't get here until 10 seconds after you do. It'll just drive through. And that's my thing with automated vehicles. And I know we went back to that, but it's really dependent on that infrastructure if we want to accomplish it in a binary computing thing system like Elon Musk and Tesla is trying to do.
Yeah, and I really think that it's just where the starting point is, kind of like what we were saying, is it has to start somewhere, and the systems we know right now are going to be the best thing that we currently have to build it. And
Oh,
really,
absolutely.
it's looking 10 years into the future before we're up to the point enough with quantum computing and quantum sensors to be able to run this much more efficiently than any human ever could, and to be able to put the infrastructure in place. So it's definitely a ways
I'm actually so excited and terrified on what a decade needs now. Like a decade in human history for all of human history was like almost nothing. It was zero. The only thing that changed was who was a parent and who had kids. That was like the biggest difference between a decade in all of human history. And now, like going back to 2013, I would not even imagine that literally every single person on the planet probably has a podcast or a voice. Like we had these apps and we had these things, but they were just for us and our friends. And it was those first few people that are like, oh, I'm going to, get more than just my friends. I'm going to get everyone on here. And now everyone's trying to do that. So what is the next 10 years going to be with blockchain, AI, robots,
Mhm.
3D printers? All of that could be into the infrastructure within less than 10 years in these places like New Jersey, New York, these big cities where the corporations are really funding that. And it's exciting because it's like, man, I read an article. It was in 2015, and it said, and my grandma was actually this age, and she's still alive. She was born in 1927, and it said a person born in the 1920s to 2015 will see more technological advancement in the next 5 years to 2020 than they did their entire life.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring that same statistic up. It was just absolutely fascinating, and it was going back to like 1900 up until the last 5 years. And they're saying within the last 5 years, we have seen more advancement, than more progress, all of that than we've seen in the last 100 years. And right now, that's even been more condensed into like 1 to 2 years. So in the next year, there's going to be more advancement, more progress, more infrastructure, more everything than we've seen for millennia, which is just mind-boggling. That's why I'm like, we really have no idea what we don't know. I see your adorable dog
That
in the background.
Oh, that's why I love futurism. Futurism is one of my favorite things because trying to guess. Like my heroes were Jules Verne, Isaac Asimov, Edgar Rice Burroughs, George Orwell. Those I loved reading those books as a kid and the things that they created. One of my favorite books of those groups is a book called The Naked Sun. And I won't go into it completely, but basically they have like augmented or virtual reality communications in their rooms. So instead of like this table is up against the wall and I'm in front of an iPad, they would have it to where the table would all of a sudden just be your table and you and me would be talking as if we weren't even there. And it was all done by lasers and everything else. But the society had been built on it, and every planet only had a small amount of humans. And this is how they communicated. This is how they held their parties. No one left their estate, nobody left their homes. They could go outside, they did their things, but it was like 50,000 miles was theirs, or 50,000 square miles was theirs of everything. So there's a murder, and the guy who gets hired is from Earth where they don't have this. And he's like, hey, I got to come see. And they're terrified of him. And like when he first meets the guy's wife that was murdered, the guy was murdered. The wife, she's like walking out of the shower naked in this 1920s like paperback book that I'm reading, and she's talking to him naked, and he's kind of like, what's going on here? Like, why are you naked? But they're not really there. And the fact that he could envision this video chat and virtual reality and how people do things, the pornographic industry and OnlyFans and what's happening there is these people, these women, these men have this empowerment to just do whatever they want on camera with no consequences because nobody's around them, even though millions of people are following or watching them do these things. And he saw that. But as a sci-fi writer and like somebody who thinks about it, how do you even envision that? Because he was envisioning something 100 years in the future, and now any kind of writer has to envision what is it going to be like in 5 years, let alone 100.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. And it's
insane.
it's fascinating because you look at like Star Trek, and Star Trek had predicted a lot of the technology that we have now. I mean, now I remember vividly as a kid seeing like these people pop up on a screen on these guys, what we call phones, but whatever they called them in Star Trek back in like the 60s, and they're able to talk, they're able to have a full conversation. And I'm like, that's now. Like that's literally what we're living in right now. And all the technologies that they're we're working on in Star Trek are actually right now being created, like 3D printing. That is definitely something that was inspired by Star Trek. But what people don't understand, and if anybody's listening that wants to learn more about this, The Future is Faster Than You Think is a great book that will just blow your mind, full of all kinds of stuff like this. But that soon we'll be able to add the basic elements of everything that exists in everything we know of, be able to say, I want a roast beef sandwich, and have it literally print you a roast beef sandwich with actual beef that were from the cells from the animal, like with everything of how you would imagine it, how you'd want it to taste. And you don't even have to cook it anymore. Like you're
That
literally
that's
printing it.
There's a TV show called The Orwell. It was created by Seth MacFarlane. It's kind of an ode to Star Trek and his own show. It's on Disney Plus now. It was originally on Hulu, but their whole entire economy is based on somebody creates a matterizer. So it's not even a 3D printer anymore. It's raw matter that just turns the matter into a cup of coffee, a gun, like anything you could possibly want. I think guns are technically illegal unless you're in the Army Corps, but in the show. But like my point is anything you can want. So like money becomes completely pointless because you just give everyone a matter box and they can have a 5-star meal. Like so like the whole society is just based on exploring and art and creating and going out and doing humanitarian aid and exploring planets. And so the concept of an economy being based on just not needing anything because it's just being made for you automatically, especially with controlling matter. We are doing technology like that right now. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Also, to go back, another with all this AI talk and what I'm talking about, one of the things that influenced me on why I don't know how fast automated trucks are going to be and cars with nothing, you could be right. 15 years from now, maybe it is. Maybe it's a certain like these test groups where the automated cars in Arizona and Phoenix at Google and Waymo, those taxis. Maybe there will be semi trucks that are just around the Pepsi facility or the Amazon facility. They can only go 100 miles out because that's what they did it. Maybe that's in 15 years. Maybe it's in 30. I don't know. But you said the future is faster than you think. I would recommend, if you're really into war and the history of war, Army of None is a book about how AI is being developed by our military now and other militaries around the world. It's written, I believe, by a Navy SEAL on how much is actually automated and the concepts of what automating it is doing. He talks about one of the things that hit me the most was he says they were up above a village that was harboring Al Qaeda terrorists. I believe it was Al Qaeda. And they had sent one of the women, one of the girls that was a sheep herder or goat herder, up onto the hill right around them. And she had a radio. She was communicating with the village on their position and everything. And it was like, on the one hand, she was a threat, but on the other hand, it was a 13-year-old sheep herder girl that's most likely being forced to do this. Now, those war dogs with the snipers and the guns and can execute these things, they would have just killed her. But these Navy SEALs, they were like, we had no interest in killing her. They knew we were up here. Didn't really matter what she was saying, but at the end of the day, we would have that robot would have just taken her out as a threat. And so there's a certain aspect to automation and AI that can never fully take place when it comes to morals. And how do we put those morals and ethics and the concept of thinking so abstractly like that? That was a human imperative to make sure she stayed alive and unharmed. She didn't want to harm them. She was just doing what she was told, probably at the peril of her own parents, her family, a sibling, her own child. Like she was a teenage girl, but who knows what they were threatening her with if they didn't do that. So why should she be punished? Why should she be killed, even though she technically was giving away their position?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, and it's absolutely fascinating because the whole implications of morality and what that means as we progress are definitely factors we have to keep in mind. I mean, it's if we want to at least have some sense of our humanness to us, then we have to keep these imperative, right? But I also think that the upside of AI and technology is far outweighs the negative sides. And I know
Oh,
that there's a lot of people that
absolutely.
are, you know, they see iRobot or whatever, they see all the Terminator and they see all these like crazy things. And then, you can go down a whole rabbit hole with all of that stuff. But I really don't see it personally. I think that there are a lot of safeguards. I think that they'll get better. And I think that eventually, and probably with the advancement of quantum computing, that even the AI itself will be able to tell if someone's a threat. I know, there's all kinds of stories and horrible stories. My brother's in the military, and I know he's seen some crazy stuff. And I'm sure we've all heard the story of, you're over in Iraq, you have a little kid, let's say 5-year old or whatever, coming towards you. It's 120 degrees, and they have this giant fur jacket over them with something underneath it, and they have no idea what it is, right?
Mhm.
And then you have the question that if this kid doesn't stop, I'm going to have to shoot this kid. He didn't do
Mhm.
anything wrong, and likely is being forced to it, right? And you have to come up to the conclusion that either he is a threat and he's going to blow up my platoon and whoever else might be in the vicinity, or I'm going to have to take him out to save, a bunch of lives. And oftentimes it's that harder decision, right? It's this harder decision of saving a bunch of people and possibly ending either, I mean, a completely innocent life, no matter what way you look at it, right?
Mhm.
And they may or may not have had a bomb strapped to them, and a lot of times they do. Some of the times they don't. And I do think that in these types of scenarios, AI is going to be much better at being able to determine, oh, that's definitely a threat. We have to disarm this, simply because they have infrared, they have all these different scanners, they have all these things that humans can't totally know. Or, no, this kid just has his teddy bear that he's holding underneath there, and someone likely dressed him up like this to make him look more threatening than he did. And then, of course, paint this bad picture of, horrible foreign whatever, you want to paint it. But I do think that going forward with stuff like this, that AI will still be much much better at being able to determine the actual threat of the person, and whether or not it's going to be something that you have to
Oh
disarm.
yeah. Using that ultra vision that we just do not have access to, at least yet. Maybe we'll replace our eyes with ultra vision eventually with the way it's going, bioengineering and technology. But that was pretty much the concept of Army of None. That's my take on AI and automation, is that even though this is going to take over a lot of things, there is the human element that has to be involved.
Yeah, and I
Like it's a
totally think that.
marrying, it's an interweaving of the two and figuring out where it goes. And so it's just like having that ability to have that, those robot war dogs that they're making, and have them sniper rifles attached and everything else, but then having that human aspect of going, stand down, robot dog. Like,
Yeah.
you've read all the things and you've determined something, but I see this that you aren't programmed for. Stand down, don't do that. And that's kind of the concept of that book, and that's where I got a lot of my ideas on AI and why I'm excited for it as well. Like, there's definitely a lot to be scary about. I can't remember what it's called, but like the paperclip paradox, I think I sent it to you last night or whatever.
Yeah.
It was just, you tell an AI to make all the paper clips in the world and it's going to destroy humans just to make paper clips because that's the most efficient way to do it. And people are worried about that. Elon Musk and all these other, guys and engineers are like sounding the alarm bells. But the reason why is, if we can make sure that those morals and stuff are encoded as we're making it, instead of just doing it and seeing how to fix it. Like, you don't want that. There's a game on PlayStation called Horizons Forbidden Dawn or something like that, and that's the whole concept. They made these automated robots, AI, that could like feed on things and create their own energy, but he forgot to program not to just destroy the whole planet. And it
Yeah.
kills the planet, and it takes place like 1,000 years in the future, when they basically made a competing AI to help it. He basically doomed the human race, but there was another scientist that figured out a way to make sure that it came back and was able to replant the earth. And it's a concept, it's a cool concept, cool game if you're into video games. But I that's I would much more appreciate us not doing that and
Yeah.
destroying everything and having to rebuild it. So I think there's a lot more good coming out. I just think it's good to also be aware. It's just like a gun. A gun can be something for good, for defense, but it can also be something for bad use. It's education and enforcement, and also having good gun control and good places in there in place so people just can't walk in and buy
Yeah.
guns and hurt people.
Well, and I totally agree that we have to have this human element and really program into these things how, you know, if you have to neutralize a target, if we're talking about war and war dogs, right? Is there a way to neutralize a target without killing them, right? Is there a way to still preserve human life as a basic humanity? And I don't know. I don't know with war. There's all kinds of different things that I just don't even want to know or be a part of, honestly. But there's this human element that has to be put into it, right? And for people that are listening that don't know what the paperclip paradox is, it's essentially if you give a AI any task that says maximize this. So whether we're talking about construction, whether we're talking about making a paperclip, if you say, I want you to, no matter what, make as many paper clips a day as you possibly can. Well, at a certain point, this robot realizes that he is being, or it is being completely slowed down by the resources that humans use. And so it can figure out, hey, I can get my robot buddies to help me make more paper clips, maximize output. And at a certain point, humans are going to have to stop using our resources so we can continuously put out more. And that's kind of essentially what this whole idea is, and what we're talking about of how to really put in the human aspect of how do you maximize something with human longevity at the forefront of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think
Exactly.
it's going to be completely interesting to see what the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years will look like. And it'll be absolutely fascinating. So I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions before I let you go for the day, and that way we can not make this way too long. But
Yeah.
I am curious as far as um, future Richard and Richard's goals and plans and passions and what he wants to accomplish. I know you and I talk about all kinds of different possibilities and different things going on in the future. So I'm just kind of curious, what is it that you want to do in your life? What is the dent that you want to make in the universe, or what is your, as Peter Diamandis calls it, your massive transformative purpose in life that you're working towards?
Um, I was thinking about that, and one of my favorite things, my goals as a child, was I realized that there is so much that you can do in your life that at the end of the day, you can just disappear. And one of the things that I saw that you became immortal and made a lasting impression was if you were a writer. And I really liked that concept. Mark Twain, just so many people, even the people that wrote 3,000 years ago, they're still alive. We can open up and read their words, and that was one of my biggest goals. But due to the fact of the current climate and what our technology is allowed and how writing is almost obsolete because of Chat GPT, like there's certain aspects to it that I think there's creativity that will be there, but it's just kind of scary what AI chatbots can do. Um, for me, it's about making a lasting impression on the people around me. I don't really care anymore about being immortal to the point of making sure someone knows who I am for 1,000 years. I think that would be cool. I would really like that, but I want to create a lasting effect in the things I value. So a lot of people are, sorry, a lot of people put that on freaking silent. I don't know why it's ringing. A lot of people are especially in our current food climate, there's the huge vegan movement and trying to get away from animals, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I did go vegan for a while and I did do that, but I have found, and the science supports me, that the least processed food and the way we feed our food and the things like that is the most valuable. These farmed fish fisheries and farmed salmon creates so much disease and cause so many ecological problems compared to just seeding and making sure that our natural fish supplies stay healthy. With climate change and warming oceans, that is an issue that we have to take seriously. And so being on the forefront of fishing up in Alaska and being able to educate with food as well as cattle and any kind of other farming, that's one of my biggest goals, is allowing transformation for the human soul and the mind shift. But what we eat really does affect how we think, process, and feel. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I want to go back to Alaska, is because I will have access to wild game, duck, geese, moose. There's these mushrooms that grow in Alaska that are just absolutely amazing and tasty, and you can't really buy them in grocery stores. Herbs of all kinds. And for me, it's just getting away from the corporate stores and not buying beef that I don't know where it came from, and really focusing on micro farms and pushing that. Because I think in our current climate of inflation and what's happening right now, and a lot of people really more caring about what they put in their bodies, we're getting to a point where our dollar is going to matter on where we're buying things from. And I think using blockchain and all these different kinds of new ways of communicating, as well as doing financials, it's going to open up a door that they won't be able to close on that. These small towns have these bartering systems, and I think blockchain is really going to be the forefront of bringing instant access to products in our communities, instead of having to buy things from all over the world or from these corporations that don't care about us. All they care about is dollars. And I really want to focus on myself, growing, healing, getting into the best physical shape I can, but also really put in like how we can live off our land. I think I just was, you sent it to me actually, was the experiment in Singapore. They're going to the 4-day work week. They get their full pay, but then the 5th day they go and like grow food to help with the food shortage. But it's not just helping with the food shortage. That food is going to be more nutritious. It's been proven when food is grown at home with the right soils and it's not corporate, planned, you're going to have more nutrient dense food.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely. And
so,
I really love that you're focusing on this problem. And I think that a lot of people are starting to understand just the scope of the problem it is, as far as, and we're definitely going to do a future episode of, the meat industry and nutrition and why it really matters what's going into our body. But I love that, the dent that you're wanting to leave is, let's not only protect this resource, but help people understand how much healthier this can be if we just think consciously of what we're doing, that it's okay to fish. It's even okay to commercial fish, but it's also just as paramount to protect it, right? And it's just as paramount to kind of merge the technologies like you're talking about to really help you be more profitable, help you be better at what you do, but also to help you be as sustainable as possible while doing it.
exactly. Just imagine if we had farms right now and the farmer isn't just, he's growing wheat and the other guy's growing soy. I'm not for all grains, but my point is instead of trying to maximize output, they're just doing their own thing. And a part of those like plants, they're trading and selling to each other for food. I don't think it should be wheat and soy. I think those are two worst things to eat in our country right now due to genetic modifications on them and other aspects of our digestive system. But my point is we got to make sure that the soil is healthy, and then trading with fishermen and other people throughout the country, and really bringing back that farming that still exists over in Europe. There's no Walmart in Europe. People aren't going, like maybe in London or something, some big city where they don't have it, but you go France, Italy, it's walking distance to all the markets, and it's still a baker. It's not a bakery in a store, it's the baker. Your produce isn't a produce section of a store, it's the produce guy. And like, I really think that needs to come back. And I think AI and all these technologies is really going to allow us to do this and kind of sidestep the corporations. Walmart and these corporations completely destroyed the mom and pop shops back in the 90s with the help of the government and pushing things to China, things like that. But 3D printing, and all these things. Just imagine if you don't have to wait on somebody to engineer something, and you figure out a way to do something hydroponically for your cucumbers or tomatoes to output, you can just go to your 3D printer and build the thing with raw material. You don't have to wait for somebody to help you, and you maximize that output. Like, that's it's just fascinating to me what we're going to be able to do with food. And I hope it's to not just for better nutrient dense food, but also for the sake of these plants and these animals to have healthier, happier lives. Like, I absolutely cannot stand, some of these massive, you know, corporations and the way that they treat the pig industry and the way these pigs are treated. Pigs are as smart as dogs. Can you imagine us in the way we treat pigs and in those
Right.
places and with that
Yeah.
kind of intelligence? And I think it's a huge difference between a pig that has a happy life that's loved and then put down humanely versus just in a slaughterhouse like it's a freaking type of Holocaust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating that you're going here simply because like I totally agree. I think that AI and the farming industry is going to be one of the biggest disruptors of our time. I think that it's going to go in this much, much more positive direction than what we currently see. And it's going to be much, much better for everybody partaking in this, from the farmer to the people eating the food. And, my sister-in-law, my brother, they're from Germany. Well, my sister-in-law is from Germany. My brother was stationed over there for 12 years.
Okay.
And every single morning they walked into town to get their meat from the butcher, to get their bread from the baker. Like, they are like literally walking is part of their society, which that alone is extremely healthy, of course. But then
Mm-hmm.
all the fresh made food, all the fresh picked vegetables, all the people putting this love and time into their craft, and that's how the whole society is. And they're much, much healthier. Like, if you compare America to Europe, like
Yeah.
they're much healthier than we are.
That's one of my favorite random things about the Mediterranean diet. Everyone goes on how healthy it is, and it is healthier. But one of the reasons that there's so many septuagenarians, whatever that word is, I can't think right now, but basically 100-year-olds, 90-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
and healthy, like functioning, is they're like, yeah, we think the Mediterranean diet has an effect, but when we went over there, it was all the stairs. Like, they live in cities that didn't have technology. And so they've been climbing stairs to do everything, whether it was carrying a furniture, food, just going outside. It's all these like steep, villages and stuff built out of stone steps. And it's all the stair walking as
Yeah.
well as this. So the walking as well, like, and building societies and centers around that. Like, it's so annoying to me that no matter where I go in America, I have to have a car because public transit is not efficient enough to deal with the fact that Walmart is 5 miles away from the Target. Or if there are local places you can go, the butcher doesn't live next door to the produce guy. So you have to have a car. And if you don't have a car, you live somewhere like on the East Coast where you still had that kind of mentality when they first settled. The rest of the West was designed with cars in mind.
Yeah, our
Like,
country is literally just too big with too much in between, or rather, not enough in between of cities for us to really not be a society that's based on cars. I think a lot of
yeah.
people don't realize this, that it's just between states, or even like Texas, going across Texas is freaking 24 hours if you go straight through. And so much in between that, like, you literally just can't not have a car in these places. Where I just moved to, you can there's people here that don't have a car, and that because there is the infrastructure for public transportation. So you can take a bus, you can take a taxi, you can take a subway, all that kind of stuff. But the majority of America is not like that. And it's
And even where those
true.
places are, it's highly inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you
um,
have to get on this bus to this bus to this bus to get onto this tram to go onto that tram. And it's just like, I honestly get it if you're trying to go somewhere out of country, but you don't have to really deal with that in a place like Germany. If you got everything you need, but you want to go see your friend over here that's not in walking distance, you get on one bus and it takes you there. Or one
yeah.
subway and it takes you there. The what's that? It's not Amtrak. What's that main train setup in Europe? Is it Eurotrack or
I'm not sure the name to be honest, but I
But
know
you
what you're
you
talking
you
about. But
have
like, yeah,
your EU passport, and you can basically go to any country within like a snap of a finger on that rail
yeah,
system.
exactly,
And
and just be
our
able to go
rail
all over the
system was
place.
built for infrastructure and hauling goods. It was never built for people.
Yeah, it was built for the Industrial Revolution to really
Yeah.
transport goods across America. It was really never meant for people, and it's we just don't have infrastructure here. But going back to kind of the farming thing too, I really do think AI is going, well, not only think, I know it's going that way because of everything that's happening right now, which I think is fascinating to kind of undo all the bastardization we've done to our own soil to we have minimal if any nutrients, so we always have to amend, we're not doing crop rotation, all that kind of stuff. Well, now we have a robot that will go and check. I think it said it could do 50 acres in a day, and it will check every single plant that you planted. It will see how the roots are doing underground. It will see what nutrients are available for your crop so you can actually plant the right crop. It'll also tell you what should go there next. So, like this year,
Mhm.
you can do corn, even though I'm also not a big fan of corn for similar reasons. But you can plant this, it's going to have the most nutrients, and then next you're going to plant this to add even more nutrients in there, where this will thrive off of what's being put in from this crop, right? Just be able to completely maximize our yields before they ever pop up, and not have to have the farmer or the workers go and check, and often not have even half the data that they can from just sending a robot to be able to check these crops to understand the actual health of their soil and how to prevent things from going completely awry as a result, which is I don't know if people truly understand what that means, but it's going to completely revolutionize the farming industry. It's going to be it so not only it's profitable again, but it's also nutrient dense again. That it's also, completely different from how we currently do farms, especially vegetable farms. But
Mhm.
I think it'll also go over into, pigs and chickens, and the people that are actually raising the most healthy of both are gonna
Mhm.
start getting more and more money. Kind of like what you said early on in the podcast, where you spend your money is where you put your votes and what survives.
Exactly. And that's my biggest thing. Walmart survived because people wanted to get everything cheaper. And now there's a way to do it to where you're cheaper than the corporations if you can make everything yourself
Mhm.
and it's healthier. Nobody's going to say no to that. As well as the fact that my big thing with the food is also that the soil. Like I don't think a lot of people, and I really love to do a podcast with you and find somebody to talk to about what we're doing to our soil and how we have to completely change because we're just going ever closer. There's a ticking time bomb towards another dust bowl during the Great Depression where we depleted the soil because of tilling and all these things. And you don't ever have to till a forest. You don't ever have to till the grass plains. So, and everything
Mhm.
grows, everything's green, everything looks great, and it lasts thousands of years unless there's some type of cataclysmic environmental disaster from a volcano or something. But even volcanoes, look at Yellowstone. There's pine trees or whatever that literally have evolved to where the pine cones only release their seeds from the heat of magma and the
Mhm.
geothermal heat after all those years. Like nature will take care of itself, but what we're doing is outside of nature.
Well, and it's
And we
crazy
need to bring
because
that back.
oh, absolutely, and here soon we actually do have someone coming on talking about just this. He covers it a little bit in my very first podcast I ever did, Dustin Haw, but he does what's called a food forest, which everything that he plants feeds each other. Everything
Mhm.
will give each other nutrients. When it dies and decomposes, goes back into the soil. And he talks about how much it's a living organism. It's
Mhm.
either it's going to be one of two things that feeds your soil. It's either going to be bacteria or it's going to be fungus. And if we understand this and we understand what feeds bacteria, what feeds fungus, and plant accordingly, then you never have to amend your soil. You never
Mhm.
have to add nutrients that you just depleted because it's already being added. It's already a
Being created.
self-sufficient system.
Hmm. And there's so many cool hacks. I saw YouTube the other day. This guy, he's like brew some tea and blend it with like I think it was like a third cup of oats and let it sit for like at least an hour or overnight. And it's so nitrogen dense. It's literally miracle grow without any kind of chemical formulation. It's miracle grow from plants because the nitrogen in that is just as high, which is
Was he
crazy to
using
me.
biochar? Do you know?
No, all it was he said take a black tea bag, open the black tea bag. I think it was two or three bags maybe. Put it in the thing, put in this third cup of oats, you know, put it in hot water, blend it so it's or no, he didn't blend it. He just put it in the hot water, let it sit there for however long. It was like at least 1 hour or 2 hours to overnight, and then strain it. And that liquid is now so nitrogen dense, it's basically homemade Miracle Grow.
Have you first of all, that's amazing. Like that's absolutely super cool. And I want to look into that now. But have you seen the YouTube video where he's talking about biochar and how they found it in the Amazon forest and how it can absolutely completely transform any soil into something that is nutrient dense that will grow that will like absolutely incredible.
I don't think I have seen that.
So what they did is they went to the Amazon forest. And of course, a few years ago, we found that there was this giant community there, right? And
Mhm.
we used to not think that, there was an old book where a guy went down through the Amazon, saw this huge thriving community. And then, like, a few years later, some other people sailed there and there was nobody there. And they're like, wait, what happened?
What?
Is this
Yeah.
true? Is this guy just like hallucinating all these people? Like, what is actually going on here? And essentially they don't know why the people left, but when they left it grew so dense that you didn't see any of the infrastructure that was there. It
Mhm.
actually wasn't until this guy who's actually a friend of my brother's that was flying the drone over the Amazon that was able to kind of lidar the Amazon
I did. I,
forest
I did see a podcast on that. Like they were using lidar, and just all these man-made structures started popping up that we had no concept
and
even
like
existed.
canalways and roads, yeah, all of it, and
Yeah.
it was just so cool. Well, one thing that popped up was the soil in the Amazon is terrible for growing like actual edible plants, edible food, for actually having this support for a huge sprawling society. There wasn't enough food there. So, how the heck did they actually grow food in the Amazon? And what they found is when they were digging, they found this really dark black soil that was not native to the Amazon. And so they're like, what is this? And what they found out is it's biochar, which biochar is any organic material that is burned at a very low temperature for like days, becomes this very uh, basically it creates this structure within the soil that you can amend with any other soil. Like you can take it to St. George, Utah, take the soil from St. George, amend it with biochar, and it will actually make it so it's nutrient dense. So you can now grow with it. So it
Okay.
actually forms these structures in the soil. And they found out that this is how they were actually able to cultivate and grow food in the Amazon forest. And it's one of the things that and I'll share the YouTube video with you. Anybody listening, it'll also be in the notes so you can actually go and check this out. But this guy is talking about how if we simply took that, that 4 day work week that we talked about, and the fifth day we grew our own food, but instead of buying other soil, instead of amending our soil with other stuff, if we just simply use biochar, which means that you can take all the dead plants, all the dead, everything around you, and you can actually burn it at a very, very low temperature, create all kinds of nutrient dense soil with these beautiful structures, amend it into your normal soil. That not only would it completely help us have these thriving, amazing gardens full of food all over the place, but also become again the number one way to caption carbon.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's one of my dreams of everything that's coming out is to see people get rid of their front and backyards. of lawns.
You
Like
and me
I just
both.
want, and I would love to see with your AI and everything, it's going to be great for like corporate farming, sure, like I get it, but it's going to be so much better for people who grow up, have no idea how plants or anything works, and to be able to call some guy, pay like $200, his 3D printer builds him a structure like a greenhouse in the back, and he can start like propagating plants and all the, they even have like these planters now that hook up to your app and it tells you when it needs water, if it needs nutrients, and automating that so people don't have to get on YouTube and do thousands of hours of research. They're growing food, bringing the soil back. That's one of the saddest things growing up. Like I told you, I was from LA. That
Mhm.
soil is so freaking gorgeous. I would go into my grandma's backyard, my grandpa's, and it's just black loam. It looks like something you would have to buy, and it's completely covered in concrete. That song, "We Paved Paradise and Made It a Parking Lot," like that is directly about Southern California.
Mhm.
There's no place like Los Angeles that I've ever seen have the most gorgeous black soil. And my grandma grew the best freaking tomatoes. My grandpa had apricot trees. We had citrus trees from the orchards that used to exist there 100 years ago in the 1900s. We just left them up and built all these houses, but it's all gone. Like the ability to grow this food, and then the waterway systems back in the day before the droughts in Southern California, they didn't keep any of the rainwater. They just built canals that got rid of it to the ocean. And so there's so much water actually being dropped on LA. LA wouldn't need to buy water from anywhere else if they went in, but it would cost trillions of dollars now to fix it. And it's just like with 3D printing and AI and all these aspects of doing that. Like one of my favorite, and we're getting a little off topic, but the Japanese, I'm pretty sure you've read this, that Japanese study where they trained that mold to grow and they gave it all of the points of their tram system, and the mold actually picked a more efficient route for the tram system to go around the whole entire city.
Yeah.
It was like doing things like that is how you're going to fix places like Los Angeles and these cities that are built on old tech that no longer works and is actually impeding human life.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. So, one last question for you is with anybody that is wanting to get involved with all this technology right now, anybody that's, saying, wow, this is really cool. How can I find out more? How can I get involved? What are just one or two tips of what you would suggest to somebody of how to get involved with this? How to, either be educated or be on the forefront or, anything like that. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on really, being a part of this change rather than just witnessing it.
For me, honestly, it's just connecting with people and education. So, like a big source of my ability with driving and fishing. Sorry, my dog is he's getting bored. I gotta go play with him. But with fishing and everything has been Audible. As much as Amazon's got its problems, Audible is one of my favorite sources of knowledge. And the ability, you don't have to take the time to read if you don't have it. I haven't had the time to actually sit down and read in years, and it sucks. But I'm driving, I'm working, I'm fishing, I'm doing something, I'm cleaning my house. I got an Audible audio book or a podcast going in my ear, so I'm learning and engaging with these concepts and these ideas that I want to know about and eventually take part of. And but that only gets you so far. And that's one of the reasons I accepted coming on and actually wanting to co-host with you, is because I do want to be a part of it. So like in the end, the simplest way I can put it is educate yourself, start reading, and especially don't just do YouTube. If all you can do is YouTube, great, but that's a stepping stone. YouTube, podcasts, those are great, but you're going to get so much more information and so much more education by actually going into these books. Like, as we said, Army of None, the future is faster as you think. You can only extrapolate so little amount of what is in those tomes of knowledge in a podcast. And
Yeah.
so that would be my biggest thing, is make sure you are reading. We have a society right now with TikTok and all these places that are your attention span is being trained to only go 5 to 30 seconds. If you're a child, if you're an adult, start untraining that today. Get yourself an Audible, and it's like $15 a month, and you get a free book every month, and you can return the book. I actually used to do that. I have more money now, so I don't have to, but I would just read a book and return it for the credit. And I kept doing that until I actually had enough money to start keeping books I liked and would want to read again. And there's
Yeah.
a certain limit to how much you can do it before they start getting mad at you. But you can do it that way and just read more books. And that would be my biggest thing is read, because that is what they honestly, and if you, I'm not much into conspiracy theories, but that is my biggest thing is I think a lot of social media is just trying to get people to stop reading and start just believing in what they hear or
Yeah,
see, not
absolutely.
actually searching.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. I would say that reading, as you know, I love reading, and we're part of this book mastermind group now that is just this is let's surround ourselves with people who are committed to growth, that want to read and network with these people, right? Like really surround yourself with these people that see the future, that aren't afraid of the future, that are like really excited about what's going on, and you can't help but get excited. But podcasts, books, and networking, our brain, as you know, is a neural net. Whatever we surround ourselves with is what's going to be show up and is what's going to show up in our life, period. Right. So if you want to be the most fit person out there, well, you're not going to be doing it with hanging out with your friends at McDonald's every day. You're going to be doing it with the people that are actually in the gym doing it, that actually have access to better information, better exercises, better nutrition than you
Mm-hmm.
currently do. So whatever it is that you're wanting to do, surround yourself with people, information, books, podcasts, all of it. Curate your environment to help you succeed, to help you understand, to help you get excited about it is whatever it is that you're interested in.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Richard. We definitely covered a number of subjects, but I think it's absolutely a great introduction to who you are, why you bring so much just to this podcast, so much knowledge, so much information, and how we can really go in a really cool direction from here. So thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me in the podcast. And I look forward to some of these future conversations that we're about to have.
Same, man, ditto in everything you just said. So I'm super excited to be a part of this and actually start living within the concepts of mind shift and shifting oneself into not only a mindset but also the lifestyle that you want to perpetuate on the world around you.
Yeah, I love that. So thank you so much. One thing I would just say from Richard here is literally take that advice to heart, curate your surroundings, listen to some podcasts, listen to some books, start living whatever it is that you want to do, and you will see just tremendous growth and progress in those areas in your life. So thank you so much, Richard. You have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye, man.
Bye.